It's always hard to top Kellogg's Center desserts, but I think we will for the rest of the evening. Before we get to the main event, there are several distinguished people that I'd like to have you meet. Dr. John Cantlin, Vice President for Research Development at MSU, and Mrs. Cantlin, who's sitting beside him. Dr. Jack Kinsinger, who is Associate Provost, and Mrs. Kinsinger, who's also with him. Dr. Willard Warrington, where are you, Bill? Oh, there. Dean of University College, and Mrs. Warrington. One of my favorite people, Mr. Clyde, Ohio. Sad Hurd. Would you stand up, Sad, and let them all see you? The newly elected officers of the Society, we have the president with us, Professor Nancy Pogel. Nancy, stand up, please. And the vice president, also newly elected, Professor Gene Dent of Lakeland Community College, Mentor, Ohio. But the important thing this evening, as distinguished as are the other guests, is the presentation of the MidAmerica Award, which we inaugurated last year. And since its inception, the MidAmerica Award has reflected the recipient's lifelong contributions, distinguished contributions to the study of Midwestern literature. And there is certainly no one more accurately described by that citation than our recipient this evening, Dr. Russel Nye, Distinguished Professor of English at Michigan State University. Professor Nye is a scholar, a philosopher, and a wise man, a man of tremendous creativity and energy. Winner of the Pulitzer Prize for his biography of George Bancroft, in which he demonstrated, incidentally, that Bancroft was a Midwesterner in spirit, if not in fact. Professor Nye has followed that initial success with a record in the classroom and the library, in publishers' lists and academic journals and organizations that is perhaps the most impressive in our time. In 1971, he made his most lasting contribution to the intellectual life of this nation when he served on the organizing committee that brought this society into existence. But the achievements of Professor Nye are overshadowed by those of Russ Nye, a man whom I've known for a quarter of a century and whose influence upon his colleagues and the thousands of students who have sat entranced in his classrooms is beyond measure. In thinking about putting these remarks together, I thought of the many instances of wisdom and kindness with which he solved the problems and advanced the careers of his scholars, his colleagues, and his friends. I remember, for example, a fellow graduate student's comment to me when I first came to Michigan State. Nye is the best there is, he told me. In fact, he's so far ahead of everyone else that when he talks about the James brothers, it may be Henry and William, or it may be Jesse and Frank. I remember, too, the grace with which he, as chairman of my doctoral committee, opened the festivities of the defense of my dissertation. As he put the volume down on the table, he said, "There's more here than anyone ever need know about Sherwood Anderson." After that, there wasn't much to be said, although the discussion went on for 3 hours. His kindness and his wisdom are legendary. Not only did he find me a job, which became the job that I still occupy with a phone call, but whenever, over the years, I've talked about leaving, his comment has always been the same. Remember, Dave, every place is bad. There are dozens of others who remember similar things about Russ. So, with continued admiration, with affection, with great pleasure, I present to Russ Nye, our own somewhat embarrassed muse, the MidAmerica Award. Russ? And I think Russ is going to have a few remarks in response.
Thank you, Dave. I don't know where I get all this reputation for wisdom, energy, this kind of thing, but it's a pretty hard act to follow. As you said, I've known this organization since it was sort of a fleeting gleam in your eye back there in the 60s and have been connected with it. And I can't think of anything that would give me more pleasure than to accept as I have this award, because I am a Midwesterner, as Dave is, and as many of you are, and those of you who aren't are, I'm sure, Midwesterners by proxy or by adoption or acceptance or something of the sort. No matter whether your accent is from Brooklyn or whether it's from the Southwest, I think we're all Midwesterners in this group. As I said, it's traditional, beginning last year with John Flanagan, to give an acceptance speech, and it's traditional to make it less than 10 minutes, which is a good idea. So therefore, that's what I have done. I thought it would be interesting as a response to take a look at how others beyond the Midwest look at us. Through this organization, we know who we are, we know what our identity is, but do others? Are we merely a kind of open space between New England on the one hand and the barbecue pits of California on the other? Are we simply rolling plains and streams without country music or peanuts or oil wells or 10-gallon hats or Cadillacs? As has often been pointed out ad nauseam, Midwesterners don't project, to use that PR term. They don't project a distinctive image, and images are all important these days. We don't talk with those long A's, and we don't say Long Island, and most of all, we don't say y'all hurry back now, although I wish we would quit saying have a nice day. Yeah. We don't wear those pointy-toed boots or follow strange cults or have mudslides or some of the magnificently corrupt political scandals that characterized East and West. Ours are sort of dull but efficient, like something out of William Dean Howells, I think. Midwesterners, I'm told, sort of stand there in the middle of the nation, going our way without fuss and fanfare. Maybe so, and for that matter, I always feel, so what? I doubt if we really could care less. But just for fun, I thought it'd be interesting to see what others see in us through polls and studies and analyses and other speculations, which neither you or I need trust a bit. I began research into this matter and found some amusing and not particularly instructive facts. I'd like to begin with what to me is an utterly fascinating study done in 1923 by William C. Bagley. It has a marvelous title called On the Possibility of Securing Moral Ratings for the Several States. Professor Bagley wanted to find out what states and regions were the most and the least moral, and he did. He did it by first analyzing the state-by-state origins of the inmates of 3 federal prisons, using the last 6 months of 1923 as his database. And what did he find? Well, Nevada, it seemed, produced the largest percentage of criminals, and Vermont the least. Now, all the southern states didn't do very well. The Midwest did fairly well, nothing gaudy, but fairly well. The 9 Midwestern states came out better than New York or Texas or California, and far better than all the southern and southwestern states, but still behind New England. Bagley taught at Harvard, I may say. He then studied homicide rates. New Hampshire had the lowest, Florida the highest. The Midwestern states, again, ranked behind New England, but ahead of everybody else. And I must say in the Midwest that Ohio and Illinois didn't do very well. They dragged down our average. But they were still lower than New York, California, and Texas. And then Bagley ran in a fascinating set of statistics. The percentage of World War I draftees who had venereal disease at the time of induction. Now, the Midwest again placed just behind New England. Now maybe you'd like the full figures. If we include the two Dakotas in the Midwest, we do pretty well at that. South Dakota ranked most moral in this respect. North Dakota, Wisconsin is third, I may say. Minnesota fourth, Iowa fifth, Kansas sixth, Nebraska seventh, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana fall down in there, and Illinois. But they are all in the top 15, and they are all ahead of Alabama, Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Georgia, which is a dead last in venereal disease in World War I. Maybe you'd like to know that. It seemed perfectly clear to Professor Bagley then that New England was the most moral region, the Midwest next, the Atlantic states third, the West fourth, and the South a long, sad last. I moved next in this research, sort of, to a three-part series that again was fascinating, done by Charles Angoff and H.L. Mencken in the American Mercury, done in 1931. This was called The Worst American State, and Mencken was interested in finding the worst state. It's the most fascinating use of statistics that I've found, as you can expect of Mencken. He threw figures around and drew conclusions with joyous abandon. And the first part dealt with wealth, the percentage paying income tax, bank clearings, bank deposits, wills and estates, income, farms that had electricity, sales of gasoline, postal receipts. And he came up with the wealthiest state, which was Connecticut, and the least, which was Mississippi. And where did we rank? In the middle again. Connecticut is first, California second, New York third. Of the wealthiest Midwestern states, Illinois was sixth. Iowa of the Midwestern states was farthest. They were 29th. And of course, down there in the bottom, Mississippi, Georgia, Louisiana. The second part dealt with culture, and the indices chosen here were fascinating. In addition to the usual school enrollment statistics, he had, as indices of culture, subscriptions to the Atlantic Monthly, the Saturday Evening Post, the Nation, and the American Mercury. The percentage of people in Who's Who, the percentage of passport applications from each state, the number of radios per capita, and newspaper circulation. Putting it all together, the most cultured state was Massachusetts, the least Mississippi. In the Midwest, interestingly enough, Michigan was highest, number 5. If we throw out the Dakotas, we're doing better, but if we include the Dakotas, North Dakota is 35th. The third part dealt with security and order, lynchings, homicides, prison population, the vote on prohibition, which incidentally was a plus factor. If you voted against prohibition, this was a plus factor. The number of illegal stills, which was a plus factor to Mencken. Miles of roads, number of churches, and an odd figure here, the percentage of Methodists and Baptists in each state, which was a negative factor, I might point out. Along with divorce rates and suicides, the number of dentists, doctors, osteopaths, and chiropractors. Well, where are we? About where you'd guess, in the middle. They ranked all the states, concluding with the best and the worst. The best was Connecticut, the worst, Mississippi. The Midwest, however, had 2 in the top 10. We had Minnesota and Iowa in the top 10. The others were in the second echelon, and again, if we include the Dakotas, we don't do as well. If we cut out the Dakotas, we can get rid of number 24 and number 25 in that. Well, with the growing popularity of polls in the 40s and 50s, there has been, of course, a plethora of similar ratings. The Gallup poll in 1972 ran one called The Best Place to Live. Only Illinois and Ohio made the top 10. But the Midwest as a whole was ahead of New Jersey, which in the 30s and 40s, incidentally, begins to enter as a dead rival to Mississippi and Louisiana as the worst. And to all the South. Again, Gallup told us what's the most beautiful state. He told us that in 1973. Well, only Michigan made the top 10, thanks to the Michigan Tourist Council, I'm sure. And here, Mississippi is next to last, but New Jersey is last. Gallup ran another poll in the early 70s, the best place to live. California, Florida are at the top, and 2 states make the top 10, Illinois and Ohio out of the Midwest. The most beautiful state, well, Michigan gets in as number 10, just ahead of Kentucky. Well, which state is the best governed? Time told us that in 1971. California is. What's the worst governed? Mississippi. But 5 Midwestern states are in the top 10. Wisconsin is highest at number 5. Indiana drags us down terribly. It's number 42, along with Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and New Jersey. In 1974 and 75, however, the Midwest Research Institute of Kansas City published an intensely scientific study of the entire nation, and the title was The Quality of Life in the United States, done over a 5-year period and published in a series of studies. They established conclusions about the quality of American life by identifying 5 components: economic, political, environmental, health, and social. And they have 123 quantifiable elements about the quality of life in any state. Among these indices were such things as the circulation of Sunday newspapers, and one that I suspect, the number of lawyers per 100,000, motorcycle registration, swimming pools per 100,000 population, water pollution scales, hotel rooms, car radios, sales of television, car loadings and greeting cards. I don't know how they get in there. But they divided theirs into cities: large, small, or not large, middle, and small. And they divided them into categories. I won't go through the whole thing, but I'd like to point out that insofar as subdivisions are concerned, both in large and middle and small city qualification, the Midwest does pretty well. Economically, we get Cleveland, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Omaha, and Milwaukee. Politically, we get Minneapolis, St. Paul, Milwaukee, Toledo, Grand Rapids, and Detroit. Environmentally, we don't do very well. Only Minneapolis, St. Paul in the top 20. Socially, we do very well. Madison, Ann Arbor, Lansing, Appleton, Wisconsin, Des Moines, Duluth, and Kalamazoo. And of the big cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Chicago. With the small states, we do well. Topeka, Decatur, Springfield, Racine, La Crosse, Terre Haute, Muskegon, Sioux Falls, Rochester, Minnesota, and that kind of thing. In all categories, there are 2 complete, utter final lasts: Birmingham, Alabama, and Jersey City, New Jersey. There's no contest at all, although these 2 cities are followed at a respectable distance by Fort Smith, Arkansas, and Laredo, Texas. Well, as Mark Twain would say, there you have it. The Middle West is always in the middle, as the quantifiers say. We know better, or we wouldn't be here at $25 registration fee. And we wouldn't be hearing all these papers, and I wouldn't be accepting with all my thanks this award. I couldn't thank you enough. Thank you.
You know, Russ, I always wondered where that term Midwest came from. Thank you. And something I learned many, many years ago, you never question Russ' statistics, because he's always got them in his right-hand pocket, and they're always right. I think at this point, we'll withdraw from this room, and I hope that you will be able to take in the program this evening, which I think is well, it's one of my favorites, and I think one that is particularly interesting. And that will begin at 8 o'clock in Lincoln Room B next door. If you'd like to, and I think this would be a good time to do it, you might look at the exhibits in room 107, which I think are rather well worth looking at. So we'll quit, adjourn, stretch, and well, we'll quit, adjourn, stretch anyway.